15 suspicious moves King Charles made after Diana's death. After Princess Diana's tragic death, King Charles made a series of moves that seemed strange. While the world mourned Diana, Charles was busy reshaping the royal landscape, and not all of his actions added up. From mysterious decisions about her funeral arrangements to unusual shifts in royal duties, these weren't just the moves of a grieving ex-husband. They were calculated and deliberate. Why did Charles rush certain choices? Why were some of Diana's closest allies suddenly shut out? And what role did Camilla play in all this? These aren't just idle questions. They reveal a side of the royal family that's rarely discussed. Today we're uncovering 15 of King Charles' most suspicious moves after Diana's death. Moves that continue to raise eyebrows and fuel speculation about what was really happening behind palace doors. Get ready, because this is the side of the story they don't want you to remember. Number 1. Fast reconciliation with Camilla. In the months following Princess Diana's death, King Charles wasted no time rekindling his relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles. While the public was still mourning, Charles and Camilla quietly resumed their romance, fueling long-standing rumors that Camilla had always been more than just a friend. The timing felt jarring. Why move so quickly? It led many to question whether Charles had been waiting for this opportunity all along. After all, their relationship had always been a contentious point during Diana's marriage, and now without Diana in the picture, it seemed like Charles was eager to make up for lost time. Some speculated that this quick reconciliation wasn't just about love, it was about power. By reestablishing his relationship with Camilla so quickly, Charles was showing the world that he was in control of his own narrative. But in doing so, he also raised questions about how long he'd been planning this move and whether Diana's death had merely expedited a plan already in place. Number 2. Public silence on Diana's legacy. In the aftermath of Diana's death, the world expected King Charles to honor her legacy, especially given her lasting impact on the royal family and beyond. Yet, for the most part, Charles remained notably silent about Diana's contributions and influence. His reluctance to publicly acknowledge her legacy raised eyebrows. Many wondered why he seemed to brush aside her memory when she'd been such a beloved figure, especially to his sons. Some speculated that Charles' silence was an attempt to shift the focus away from Diana, whose popularity had always overshadowed his own. Others believed it was more personal, that Charles still harbored resentment towards Diana despite her death. By remaining quiet about her legacy, he seemed to be distancing himself from her in the public eye. This silence only deepened suspicions, making people question his true feelings towards the people's princess and whether he was trying to rewrite history in a way that suited him. Number 3. Sudden changes in royal protocol. Shortly after Diana's death, there were reports of King Charles making quiet behind-the-scenes efforts to adjust royal protocol. These sudden changes caught many off guard, particularly those close to the palace. Insiders suggested that Charles was positioning himself for greater control, using the moment of public mourning to implement reforms that might have otherwise met resistance. Adjustments in protocol following a significant royal death aren't uncommon, but the timing here felt too convenient. It raised the question, was Charles using this period of national grief to consolidate power within the royal family? By making these changes so quickly after Diana's passing, it seemed like Charles was clearing a path forward for his own reign, ensuring that his vision of the monarchy would dominate. This swift reshuffling of the royal deck left many wondering if it was less about honoring Diana and more about securing Charles' future. Number 4. Immediate focus on public image. Almost immediately after Diana's death, Charles seemed unusually preoccupied with repairing his own public image. For years, his reputation had taken a beating, particularly in light of his extramarital relationship with Camilla. Now, with Diana gone, Charles appeared to shift gears, focusing not on grief, but on restoring his standing in the eyes of the public. Some saw this as a necessary step. After all, as the future king, public perception mattered. But others found his rapid pivot to public relations cold and calculated. Rather than showing vulnerability or deep sorrow, Charles seemed more concerned with damage control. His sudden push to manage his image so soon after Diana's death sparked speculation that his grief was secondary to his desire to rewrite his story. It left people wondering, was Charles using this tragedy as an opportunity to reset his reputation, hoping that time would eventually heal the public's judgment of him? Number 5. Push for Camilla's acceptance. One of the more controversial moves Charles made after Diana's death was his persistent behind-the-scenes efforts to have Camilla accepted by the public. While many were still mourning Diana, Charles was quietly pushing to rehabilitate Camilla's image, paving the way for her eventual acceptance as his wife. This effort felt rushed, and many questioned why Charles seemed so determined to make Camilla's presence in his life official so soon. It wasn't lost on the public that Camilla had long been the third person in his marriage to Diana, and the push to legitimize her role in his life so quickly after Diana's passing seemed tone-deaf. Was this a calculated move to solidify Camilla's position before too much time passed? Or was it simply a matter of Charles following his heart? Either way, the timing was suspicious, and many viewed it as an attempt to fast-track Camilla's acceptance before the public had fully processed Diana's loss. Number 6. Refusal to acknowledge Diana's influence on the boys. As the mother of his 2 sons, Princess Diana had a profound impact on Prince William and Prince Harry, yet after her death, King Charles appeared reluctant to publicly acknowledge her influence on their upbringing. In fact, there were moments where Charles seemed to downplay Diana's role in shaping the young princes, choosing instead to emphasize his own contributions as a father. This refusal to give Diana her due credit raised suspicions. Was Charles trying to distance his sons from their mother's legacy? Or was he simply trying to assert his own role in their lives? Whatever the reason, his lack of public acknowledgement of Diana's influence felt like an attempt to rewrite the narrative. Diana had been a devoted mother, and her influence on William and Harry was undeniable. By not fully recognizing this, Charles only deepened the perception that he was more interested in his own image than in honoring the memory of his late ex-wife. Number 7. Quick reorganization of the royal household. After Diana's death, Charles swiftly reorganized the royal household, consolidating power and taking on a more dominant role. This sudden restructuring raised eyebrows, particularly among royal insiders who'd grown accustomed to the way things had been run. Was this simply a matter of practical necessity, or was Charles using the moment to cement his authority within the royal family? The speed with which these changes were made led many to speculate that Charles had been preparing for this shift long before Diana's death. It seemed like a calculated move to ensure that moving forward he would be the central figure in the royal household, with little room for dissent. This quick reorganization also left many wondering if Charles was trying to erase Diana's influence from within the palace, quietly reshuffling those who had been loyal to her in favor of his own trusted allies. Number 8. Secret meetings with media heads. One of the more covert actions attributed to King Charles after Diana's death was his alleged secret meetings with key figures in the media. These meetings reportedly focused on managing and controlling the narrative surrounding his reputation. For years, the media had been a thorn in Charles' side, particularly regarding his relationship with Camilla and his treatment of Diana. But after Diana's death, Charles seemed determined to shift the tide in his favor. The timing of these meetings raised suspicions. Was he using his influence to ensure that the public would see him in a more favorable light? It wasn't just about damage control. It felt like a calculated effort to reshape his image while the world was still reeling from the loss of Diana. The media's portrayal of Charles did indeed soften in the years that followed, which only fueled speculation that these meetings had successfully swayed public perception. The question remains, how much control did Charles really have over the narrative, and at what cost? Number 9. Efforts to distance himself from Diana's friends. After Diana's death, many of her close friends suddenly found themselves cut off from the royal circle. These were individuals who'd been by Diana's side during some of her most difficult moments, and yet after her passing, King Charles allegedly made efforts to distance himself and the royal family from her inner circle. This move was met with skepticism. Why would Charles want to sever ties with those who had been loyal to Diana? Some believed it was an attempt to erase her influence, to ensure that those who had been close to her wouldn't continue to speak out on her behalf. Others saw it as a calculated effort to prevent any further damaging stories about his relationship with Diana from surfacing. By distancing himself from her friends, Charles may have been trying to control the narrative even further, ensuring that Diana's legacy wouldn't overshadow his own. But this move only deepened suspicions about his true motivations. Number 10. Shift in his relationship with the press. In the years leading up to Diana's death, Charles had a contentious relationship with the press, particularly when it came to his personal life. But after her passing, there was a noticeable shift in how the media portrayed him. Suddenly, the harsh criticism seemed to fade, replaced by more sympathetic coverage. This shift didn't go unnoticed. Many speculated that Charles had made a concerted effort to rebuild his relationship with the press, perhaps even using those rumored secret meetings with media heads to his advantage. Was this a genuine attempt to reconcile with the media, or was it a calculated move to ensure that his side of the story was the one being told? Whatever the case, the shift in tone was suspicious. The once relentless scrutiny of Charles' relationship with Camilla and his role in Diana's downfall seemed to diminish, leaving many to wonder what had changed behind the scenes. Number 11. Lack of public grief. One of the most glaring criticisms King Charles faced after Diana's death was his apparent lack of public grief. While the world mourned the loss of the people's princess, Charles appeared emotionally detached, even distant. His public appearances following her death were measured and controlled, with little outward display of sorrow. This lack of visible grief led many to question whether Charles was truly affected by Diana's death or whether his cold demeanor was an indication of something deeper. Some speculated that Charles was simply trying to maintain royal protocol, adhering to the stiff upper lip tradition of the monarchy. But for others, his behavior felt calculated and detached, as if he were more concerned with his public image than with mourning the mother of his children. This lack of emotion only fueled further suspicions that Charles had long since moved on from Diana, both emotionally and politically. Number 12. Efforts to shield Camilla from scrutiny. While the media frenzy surrounding Diana's death continued to dominate headlines, King Charles worked tirelessly behind the scenes to shield Camilla Parker Bowles from the worst of it. Camilla had long been a controversial figure, blamed by many for the breakdown of Charles and Diana's marriage. After Diana's death, Charles seemed determined to protect Camilla from further scrutiny, going to great lengths to keep her out of the media spotlight. This effort felt suspicious to many, particularly given the timing. Why was Charles so focused on protecting Camilla when the public's attention was still on Diana? Some speculated that Charles was laying the groundwork for Camilla's eventual acceptance as his partner, trying to keep her image as untarnished as possible in the wake of the tragedy. By shielding her from the media, Charles may have been trying to prevent further damage to her reputation. But in doing so, she only deepened suspicions about the true nature of their relationship. Number 13. Suspicious timing of public appearances. In the weeks and months following Diana's death, King Charles' public appearances seemed strategically timed. He made sure to appear at key moments, often coinciding with significant royal events or critical points in the public's mourning process. To some, this seemed like a clever PR move, appearing at just the right time to deflect attention from more controversial stories or to redirect the narrative in his favor. But to others, the timing felt calculated, as if Charles was using these appearances to control the flow of information and steer public sentiment. These well-timed public engagements raised questions about whether Charles was genuinely grieving or simply playing the long game, managing his public image in the wake of one of the greatest tragedies to hit the royal family. The strategic nature of his appearances only added to the growing suspicion that every move Charles made during this period was carefully orchestrated. Number 14. Control over the narrative of Diana's death. One of the most persistent rumors surrounding King Charles after Diana's death was his alleged control over how the tragedy was portrayed, particularly within royal circles. While the official narrative pointed to a tragic accident, some believed that Charles had undue influence on the way her death was discussed publicly and within the palace. There were whispers of Charles shaping the conversation to protect his own image, ensuring that his involvement in Diana's life and death remained carefully managed. Was this simply a case of a man trying to control his legacy, or was there something more sinister at play? The idea that Charles had control over the narrative of Diana's death, even subtly, raised serious questions about how much influence he wielded behind closed doors. For many, it felt like another example of Charles' calculated approach to maintaining power and protecting his reputation at all costs. Number 15. Quiet influence over the investigation. Finally, there were rumors that Charles had some level of influence over the official investigation into Diana's death. While no concrete evidence had ever been presented to suggest that Charles directly interfered, the whispers of his involvement have persisted for years. Some speculated that Charles used his position to quietly steer the inquiry in a direction that would protect the royal family from further scandal. Whether or not these rumors hold any truth, they highlight the deep-seated suspicion surrounding Charles' actions in the wake of Diana's death. The idea that he could have quietly influenced the investigation adds yet another layer of intrigue to an already complicated story. While the official findings may have put certain theories to rest, for many, the suspicion remains. Did King Charles have more control over the investigation than we'll ever know? This lingering question continues to haunt his legacy, casting a shadow over his role in one of the most tragic events in modern royal history. These actions have raised eyebrows for years, leaving many questions unanswered and fueling ongoing speculation. But what do you think? Were these just the decisions of a grieving man trying to move forward, or was there something more calculated behind his choices? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Do you believe any of these moves were part of a larger plan? Let us know. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And of course, tap the bell icon so you never miss out on our latest uploads. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.